Right, let's talk about John Deere. You know, the massive company famous for its bright green and yellow tractors. These machines are a common sight on farms all across America, and indeed the world. For many, John Deere isn't just a company, it's a symbol of American farming. They've been around since 1837, building a reputation for reliable, sturdy equipment, so you can imagine the surprise when news started to trickle out. Whispers at first, then more concrete announcements suggesting that this cornerstone of U.S. manufacturing was planning to move some of its operations. Not just shuffling papers or call centers, but actual physical production of machinery parts. It was the sort of news that makes people choke on their morning coffee. Deere and Company began to unveil plans, specific plans, plans that involved taking bits of their manufacturing previously rooted firmly in American soil and transplanting them. And where were these bits heading? South of the border, to Mexico. Yes, Mexico. This decision sent shockwaves rippling through various sectors, from the dedicated workers on the factory floors in states like Iowa, to the sharp-suited analysts on Wall Street, and all the way to the hallowed halls of Washington, D.C. Suddenly, everyone had questions. Questions about American jobs, the future of the U.S. economy, and the cherished Made in America label. Now let's introduce a rather prominent figure into this unfolding drama, former President Donald Trump, a man whose approach to international trade could be described as robust. One of his favorite tools was the tariff. A tariff is basically a tax placed on goods that are imported from other countries, making them more expensive for buyers in the home country. The general idea behind tariffs is to protect domestic industries. Mr. Trump was a very vocal proponent of this strategy. He wasn't just talking about small adjustments, he was threatening some rather hefty tariffs on goods from major trading partners. For instance, he floated the idea of a 10% tariff on virtually all imports from China. And for John Deere specifically, if they dared to move manufacturing from the US to Mexico, he threatened a colossal 200% tariff on their products sold in the US. This kind of talk creates a massive amount of what business people call uncertainty. Companies like John Deere, which operate on a global scale, find this incredibly disruptive. Amidst this climate of tariff threats and economic uncertainty, John Deere began to make some concrete moves. In June 2024, the company announced plans to shift some of its production from its facilities in Iowa to a brand new plant in Ramos Arizpe, Mexico. This new Mexican facility is slated to be up and running in 2026. It's important to note that this particular shift wasn't for their iconic green tractors, but rather for construction equipment. This wasn't an isolated incident or a sudden decision. The company had signaled similar intentions before. Way back in 2022, Deere had already announced that the production of cabs would be moving from their Waterloo, Iowa plant to their Ramos Component Works in Mexico. This particular move was projected to affect approximately 250 jobs in Waterloo. Furthermore, some work from their Ottumwa, Iowa plant was also being transferred to Monterrey, Mexico. John Deere issued statements clarifying their position, emphasizing that they were not abandoning their U.S. manufacturing base. According to the company, less than 5% of the products they sell in the U.S. are actually manufactured in Mexico. They also pointed out that over 75% of all their sales in the U.S. market come from their U.S.-based factories. The company's main argument for these shifts was one of strategic repositioning. They contended that moving less complex operations to other locations like Mexico was a necessary step. All these strategic maneuvers, production shifts, and the looming shadow of potential tariffs inevitably had an impact on John Deere's financial performance. The numbers started to tell a story of a company navigating some pretty choppy economic waters. For the first quarter of 2025, reported in February, Deere announced a significant 35% drop in sales, which fell to $6.8 billion. Alongside this, their profits also took a hit, declining to $869 million. These figures were attributed in part to reduced production volumes and an effort to decrease dealer inventories. Despite the rather bleak headline figures for that first quarter of 2025, there was a small glimmer of hope. John Deere's revenue and earnings per share actually came in slightly above what many financial analysts had predicted. The company even projected a net income for the full fiscal year in the range of $5 billion to $5.5 billion. So, While they were certainly facing challenges, they weren't exactly on the brink of collapse. Beyond the spreadsheets and stock market reports, these corporate decisions and economic pressures have a very real, very human impact. In 2024, the company reduced its workforce by over 1,800 employees across its factories and offices in the American Midwest. The company stated that these widespread layoffs were a consequence of a weakening farm economy, which led to a reduction in customer orders for new equipment. When farmers are experiencing financial difficulties and their income drops, they tend to postpone large capital expenditures, like buying new tractors or combines. This downturn in demand inevitably flows up the supply chain, affecting manufacturers like Deere directly and forcing them to make tough decisions about staffing levels. The specific job losses linked directly to the production moves to Mexico were, understandably, a particularly sensitive issue. The transfer of cab production from Waterloo, Iowa to Ramos Arizpe in Mexico, for example, was expected to affect approximately 250 American jobs. This human element, the impact on jobs and local communities, is often at the very core of the political discourse surrounding manufacturing and trade policy. Now let's delve into a rather important agreement, the USMCA. That stands for the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. It's the trade pact that replaced the older NAFTA in 2020. Think of it as the updated set of rules governing how goods and services flow between these three North American countries. One of the primary aims of the USMCA is to encourage more manufacturing to take place within North America itself. It includes specific rules of origin which dictate that a certain percentage of a product's components must be sourced from within the US, Mexico, or Canada for that product to qualify for tariff-free treatment. This is a powerful incentive for companies to locate their production facilities and source their materials within this bloc. By producing components or assembling equipment in Mexico, Deere can ensure that its products meet the USMCA's regional value content requirements. This allows them to move those goods into the US market with minimal or no import tariffs, thereby maintaining cost competitiveness. This isn't unique to John Deere. Many other companies are making similar calculations and adjustments to their supply chains in response to the USMCA's provisions. The decisions made by a corporate giant like John Deere, particularly those involving production shifts and responses to tariff policies, don't just affect the company itself or its direct employees. These actions create ripples that spread throughout the broader economy. Consider the American farm economy, for example. When a major supplier of agricultural machinery like Deere starts to cut back on production and reduce its workforce, it can further dampen sentiment and investment in the agricultural sector. When Deere reduces its output of tractors, combines, and other large field equipment, it has a knock-on effect on their extensive network of suppliers. These suppliers, many of which are smaller businesses, provide various components and services to Deere. A reduction in orders from a major customer like Deere can lead to their own production cutbacks and potential job losses, thereby spreading the economic impact further down the supply chain and into more communities. Then there's the complex issue of international trade relationships. The aggressive tariff threats made by figures like former President Trump create significant friction. Whenever a prominent, historically American company like John Deere announces decisions that involve shifting any production or cutting jobs, you can absolutely guarantee that politicians will be quick to weigh in. Former President Donald Trump, for example, didn't mince his words. He directly threatened John Deere with those eye-watering 200% tariffs if they proceeded with moving manufacturing operations to Mexico. John Deere, finding itself in the political crosshairs, naturally attempted to control the narrative and defend its decisions. On September 26, 2024, the company issued a carefully worded statement asserting, "We are not moving production to Mexico." The company sought to clarify by emphasizing that less than 5% of its U.S. sales are derived from products manufactured in Mexico. Other political figures also joined the conversation. Republican Senator Marco Rubio, for instance, penned a letter to John Deere's CEO, stressing the critical importance of maintaining a robust and vibrant manufacturing sector within the United States. On the other side of the political aisle, Vice President Kamala Harris was reportedly preparing to announce new federal incentives aimed at boosting domestic production. It's clear that supporting U.S. manufacturing is a bipartisan talking point, particularly potent during election cycles. Amid discussions of moving production to Mexico, John Deere reassures its commitment to U.S. manufacturing. The company highlights over $2 billion invested in American factories since 2019. Innovations like the See and Spray system and 9RX tractors are produced in Iowa. Deere argues that relocating simpler tasks to Mexico allows U.S. plants to focus on advanced manufacturing. This strategy aims to enhance high-value production in the U.S.